Blessings, everyone, and good morning. Sorry for my voice, it's pretty early. I'm doing this because I don't know how much time I have left. I'm going to be leaving there. My father's not doing very well, and it's quite the trip. It's a day trip, and just to drive alone. So again, I'm on call, so I'd like to get this out. Now, I brought up the Renaissance. I brought up this whole thing about the rebirth of the underworld, the arts, that they, in a way, it's their own totem. It's through their arts would be their totem. It'd be telling their story is what it is. Not so much as to worship, but to tell a story. And I didn't think I'd be back here, but we need to understand MK Ultra. We need to understand what it means to you personally. And this is the battle of the mind. This is your battle. This is the war God is talking about within your own mind. This is why it's so personal and why you need to have that personal relationship. Because it is personal. It's your mind. Your personal mind. Your personal battle. It's about your consciousness. And it's vital and that you understand. When Mary Magdalene asked Jesus what sees the vision, is it the soul, or is it the spirit, or is it the soul? And Jesus responded by saying, it's what's in between. How does this not affect us today? The question that Mary asked Jesus, and Jesus responded with the answer that we hold today. It's what's in between. It is your mind. It is the subconscious. Don't worry about what other people say or think when you read this journal that Mary Magdalene had written and has just been found. Don't discard it because she was Gnostic. She was asking the right questions in her time. Wow. Wow. I don't call it the Gospel of Mary. It was Mary's journal. It was a book she was writing in. It's everything that we're dealing with today. Your mind. The battle within is one every individual mind. And once that becomes collective into one community, you're lost. Emotions hold you, okay? They bind you. People, a complete stranger, and you know what I'm talking about, will trigger you in a grocery store, walking your dog. Jonathan Kleck even insulted my visual when he showed the picture of those kids coming and sliding down the body part at a park. We went to a satanic village to see this. It hurt the eyes. Emotions you need to put down. Once you put those emotions down, you will feel freedom. The triggers will stop. All right, so I wanted to read this because it does deal with emotions and movements, but really more so the emotions and what they're dealing with here, what they're telling you here, and you could read it on your own, but it's all about epilepsy, and they want to do it in a group setting. This is what they're trying to do, and this is where everybody was looking for the group behavior in what they were doing. So in their study, they focused on the epilepsy part of the research, okay? This research included planting electrodes in the brains of both animals and humans, allowing him to control their movements and emotion. And emotion, okay, this again, free yourself from your emotions. This is what happened, that they were able to do with an 11-year-old boy. In one 11-year-old boy, he was able to elicit a change in sexual identity by stimulating the superior temporal convolution, or I don't know, of the brain. Upon stimulation, the boy would identify himself as a female and express the desires to marry a male. Okay. Other doctors supplied with Delgado's implants performed their own experiments at various universities and hospitals. UCLA is one of them. Right here, UCLA. Okay. So there's the power that they had over this 11-year-old boy and his sexuality. But again, you can read that, okay? All right, this is where I want to be here. Okay. As it would be discovered, the human brain is very responsive to externally applied electromagnetic fields. Very important to know this. Two doctors in particular have done the bulk of the research using electromagnetic fields to alter human brain activity. Dr. Michael Persinger, currently at Laurentian University in Canada, that's where I went, had studied the ability of magnetic fields to create all false memories and alter consciousness for many years. Got that? This doctor in Canada has studied the ability of magnetic fields to create the false memories and alter consciousness for many years. Electromagnetic fields. We know that it is not the spirit, nor is it the soul that sees the vision. Okay. Again, funded by the Navy. All right. Okay. Been funded by the Department of the Navy. And he sits on the board of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation. The FMSF has maintained a hostile stance against the reality of multiple personality disorder. Indeed, multiple personality disorder is a technique used in MK Ultra to create the Mandarin or whatever candidates. According to the FMSF, multiple personality disorder if it exists, is created by the therapist in a manner akin to occult brainwashing, it must be noted that many other members of the FMSF have also been involved in MK Ultra sub-projects. I think there's 149 of them. It was my opinion, as should be evident to the reader, that the goal of the FMSF is to spread misinformation and divert attention away from the current research on mind control. Okay, so they're talking about the temporal lobes, related experiences during brief exposure to the milligus intensity, extremely low frequency magnetic fields. Dr. Persinger is accredited with developing the God helmet. Now, the God helmet here is when I believe that because of these, frequencies, okay, when people are saying, God told me to kill him, God told me to do this, God told me to do that, okay, this is where it's all coming from. This is the God helmet. This is the frequency. This is what's inside the head. And what I've been saying from the very beginning on my channel is that God's voice is not in your head. God's voice is not a thought or within a thought. God's voice, Jesus' voice, is not in your head and is not within a thought. He's alive, he's well, he talks to you. When I would hear voices like this, it was always outside of my head, from behind and in my ear. It tells you in Scripture of this instruction, to receive instruction, as I did with Ezekiel. So when this man and many others say, oh, God told me, and I heard him, it was in a thought, or it was a thought process, or I heard God in my head, that is not God. I don't think I've heard any of the apostles say anything about God speaking to them in their head. So here we have the God helmet. Which, when placed on a subject's head, uses microwave energy to stimulate the temporal lobes of the brain. The subject will then have spiritual experiences akin to being in the presence of a supreme being or having alien contact. Well, isn't that interesting? So then you could say, well, I'll get into that later. Okay, so here we are. All right. I'm just going to go into it. Now, here the experience is akin to being in the presence and having alien contact. Now, this I've asked myself, well, because I believe that I could be a candidate of this MK Ultra programming, because my grandfather was in the military and my father was never really a man of his own. And I'm learning information always about this. So I get little nuggets here and there. And again, my father was not of his own. He kidnapped my brother and myself from my mother at a very young age. And we ended up where he had taken us by train to BC. And that's when we were handed over to the government, really, because this is the children's aid. And when my mother found out where we were, she fought for us in the courts and found us in foster care. Now, what man takes two children from their mother who doesn't have anything, not even a roof over his head, takes two children and then drops them off in BC? When I came back to my mother, there was no I had no ties with my mother. I didn't recognize her. It breaks my heart. There was no connection with my mother. And she still cries about that to this very day. So yeah, I really believe that there's a great possibility. I would not be surprised. Because when I was very young, I saw this, what they would call Hollywood gray, coming out of this light and saying to me in a tone, like not in a tone, but just yelling at me, yelled because I was running away from it, and said, "Kelly, we'll be back." And I stopped and I turned around and I looked at this thing. And he was my height. It was my height. And it had big eyes. That's all I knew. That's the only way I was able to describe this thing, that it wanted me to go with him. My father heard me screaming. He said I was climbing the walls. Absolute trauma. It scared the crap out of me. He didn't know what to do. So that was the first time. The second time was when I was 12. It was all in my head. The noise, the screeching, the sound, the piercing in my ears, and the voice that said, "Do you want to live or do you want to die?" Believe me, it was not said that way, but... And it was all in my head. My point here is it was all in my head. And when I heard the voice inside my head say, "Do you want to live or do you want to die?" I was going to say die because I couldn't handle the pain. And then I said, "No, I want to live. I want to live. Jesus, I want to live." And that's when he come in and he just took it all away. He just... whoosh, it was gone. Gone. And he left me in peace. I swear I felt peace. I had no fear. There was no fear. And then this thing comes back, or whatever it was, because I didn't know at the time. And I was that energy that was being pulled from my body, and I was watching it, and it was all colored, and I was just watching this. And then I just forced myself off the bed, and that's when I heard the woman, because I was sitting there thinking, what just happened in there? And that's when the voice said, "Who are you talking to?" And I said, "Jesus." I was told to go back to bed. It was okay. I did. And it was okay. Now this woman, I don't know who she is, this woman voice. I only know this woman had shown up 3 times. And every time it was with these things, these green things, okay? The first time was with that thing coming out of the white light. I would call it gray, the Hollywood gray, now knowing. But this woman, when I was screaming for help, she didn't even look at me as though I wasn't even there. She never heard me. The second time is what I just told you, when I was 12 years old, and the enemy in my head. Again, there was a woman who said, "Who were you talking to?" And the third time she shows up is when my brother has his aneurysm, was it 3 years ago, 4 years ago? I think it was 3 years ago. And they came back, and this one with the claw flicked me in my private part. And I was so mad, and I wanted to fight back. I was mad. I just remember having a fist, and I was just ready to hit. I was just going to start swinging. And then it was gone. So I started praying. Oh, I started praying. How did this get so close? Why? You know, all these questions. So the following morning, same thing happens, but this thing now is at the foot of my bed, and it's flopping my feet. It's lifting up my foot, you know, having it fall back in its claw kind of thing. And as soon as I recognize it, gone. So I'm asking in prayer, what's happening? I don't understand. And that's when I heard in spirit, they can't hurt you. And that's when I thought, that's right. It didn't even feel like a fight. They were weak. And that's what came out of that they were weak. And I was good with that, you know? So then, I think it was about a week or two later, I get a phone call from my daughter that my brother's in trouble, that there's an aneurysm, and they're having a huge snowstorm, and they can't get him. They can't lift the plane. They have to. The plane's grounded. They can't move, and every minute is so important, you know. So okay, I hang up with my daughter, and all of a sudden it was like a heaviness that come over me, like a blanket just come right over me. And I just wanted to go right into sleep. I think I did. And then I heard the woman's voice. Are you coming? As though she was standing at my side door of the house. And as soon as I heard, are you coming? I jerked right out of the bed. I ran downstairs, which I should have done at the beginning, but I fell asleep. I started to make the phone calls. I started packing, and on the road I went to meet my brother. So then I'm putting all of this aside. I get to the hospital, and there's my nephew and I, and we go in to see my brother. And my brother only sees his son. He doesn't see me standing beside him. And he says to his son, he says, what's that movie, he said, with the tails? You know that movie with the tails, those things? And my nephew said, yeah. He says, Avatar. And he says, yeah. He said, they were at Kelly's. My mouth just, it's my confirmation. But now I know my brother is also being attacked by them. He says to his son, they wanted me to do something and I wouldn't do it. I would not do it. And I knew it was sex. I knew it had something to do with sex. So years go by, and my aunt had passed away, and so I hadn't talked to my brother since then, and there were so many things going on with him there. I just, you know, and so at the funeral, we started talking, and he was telling me that ever since his surgery that he was hearing voices, and the voices were keeping him up all night, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, yelling at him. Still do today. He says he can't go into public places. Too many voices. He's suffering. So then I asked him, you said that they wanted you to do something, Jim. Was it sex? And that's when he looked at me. He says, you know. I said, yeah, I know. This, I think, has a lot to do with the military. So there's your alien contact, okay? Nothing new under the sun. Now, as being a supreme being, no, see, I had to really look into this, and I had to know what was his, to discern what was his. So when Jesus showed himself to me, when I saw him, I was in a parking lot, in a car, waiting for my husband at the beer store. Very busy on a Saturday, Sunday. And I heard a voice in the back of from behind and in my ear, get out of the car and look up. And I just shook my head thinking, I don't know that voice. Get out of the car and look up. So I did. I got out of the car and I looked up. And I saw this white ball as like those bouncing balls for musical to sing along. And it just before it hit my face, it just opened up. Just the whole sky, just everything just opened up. And I was just looking at him. And then I was allowed, without words, one question. And then I asked about meditation. And then again, that's when the sky just opened up, and there he was in Gethsemane, in the garden, praying to Father Abba. Praying to his Father. I never understood what it meant. Why would he show himself to me like that? If nobody is going to listen. I didn't know who to tell. And when I did, nobody cared. So that was holy. And as far as the MK Ultra, those were the green things. When Jesus came to me, I never saw, like light or water, as others would say. It was his voice. It was his voice.